we're now going to continue our coverage of Black History Month. Sierra Whaley is in studio with this week's edition. Sierra, what can you tell us?
In 1940, President Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered the U.S. Army Air Corps to train African-American pilots and mechanics. In 1941, the formation of the first group of black military pilots and mechanics was underway in Tuskegee, Alabama, where thousands of men and women trained to serve in World War II. I got to talk with a man who educates people all over the country about the Tuskegee Airmen. He was lucky to call one of those pioneers his dad.
They weren't looking for any special favors or any special treatment. They really they wanted the right to fight and to do the best they could for their country.
During World War II, the U.S. military was segregated. While many African Americans served in the military on the front lines as cooks or drivers, there wasn't space for people of color to excel or do work beyond the quota. However, with the odds against them, the Tuskegee Airmen, the first African American pilots and crew members, changed military history. History that 12-year-old Bob Shepard didn't fully understand his father was a part of when they moved to Westbrook, Maine in the 70s.
My dad is James Shepard, and he grew up in New York City in Harlem, and his heroes were aviation pilots. They were the people like Charles Lindbergh and Bessie Coleman, who were breaking all sorts of aviation records. He got to meet pilots when he was a young man, including some African-American pilots too, and they inspired him to head in that direction career-wise.
He attended Heron Aviation High School in New York, which was a magnet school. He was the only African-American in the school at the time. When he turned 18, James Shepard knew the war was coming, so he signed up for the Army. The next day, his father escorted him to the train station, and he took off with just a toothbrush, comb, and the clothes on his back to Tuskegee, Alabama.
He's the first generation born here in America. His parents immigrated from the West Indies in the 1920s. And so that's an interesting sidebar of the story as well. And that's a similar story that I heard from attending Tuskegee events with my dad and my mom when they were both alive, and heard it time after time, is that a lot of these people were the first generation to go to college, second generation Americans, and they really were aiming to just get as far as they could. Those that were attending college understood that was a track to becoming officers, and there weren't a lot of black officers in the U.S. Army at that point.
His father was sent to Italy, where one of the 4 squadrons of the 332nd Fighter Group had already been deployed during the war.
We spent 18 months living in a pup tent with 6 other guys in the cold of the Italian winters and the heat of the summer, maintaining and servicing 4 different types of aircraft that his squadrons served on. He worked his way up to the position of crew chief, which is in charge of a specific aircraft, and then actually worked himself into the position where he was in charge of other crew chiefs, so the crew chief of crew chiefs, and gained a great deal of experience, and all along was taking photos of what was going on. And those photos are a big part of the presentations that I do now.
Bob was in broadcast journalism in the 80s and has used his journalistic skills over the years to capture his father's story. He says his father didn't start talking about his experience until the 50th anniversary of World War II.
The courage and bravery of everybody that was part of that greatest generation that stepped forward to fight against the Axis powers as well. But they actually were fighting a second war as well. They were fighting a war against systemic discrimination. And, that experiment was doomed to failure.
Make sure you join us for part 2 as we dive into when James Shepard started to talk about his experience as a Tuskegee Airman during World War II.